This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Scrolling through ArtStation, I think more often than not, I come across a lot of 3D renders, usually in close vicinity and on a daily basis, that contains some kind of a water body in them. So I think it's safe to assume that us 3D artists love adding water into our renders. I wouldn't be surprised if every single one of you watching hasn't already attempted such a scene before. So why not dig a little deeper into the subject? Go through all the different ways you can create water within Blender, understand all the parameters that go into making water look realistic, learn how to create the perfect material for it with foam and bubbles and dirt and volumetric gunk and even caustics integrated into them. I will also guide you to some really useful resources if you're planning to make a water-based scene, and we can learn how to animate water too, which might seem like a difficult thing to do if you haven't done it before, but it's really not, as I will show you later in the video. And we will not just be covering surface level tips, we'll actually go deep into the subject and also cover some underwater dynamics. And hey, water comes in all shapes and forms, so why not take a fun little detour and briefly cover one of its most frequent use cases. And then finally, we can jump in and learn some neat little tricks to cheat in fluid simulations, learn some simple tips and tricks you can use to create fake water simulations so we can avoid the pain and suffering of a real fluid simulation. But just in case you are one of those psychos who have the time and patience for some real water simulations, we will briefly go into that as well. And then we end the video on a hopeful note as we look into the future of water simulations using geometry nodes and what the new simulation nodes will enable us to do in the future. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. So let's say we have this scene and we want to add some water on the shore here. The simplest way to do that would be to just add a plane and place it in a way that you don't see its edges anywhere in the frame. Then go into the shader editor and add a Musgrave texture into the bump node, and with a little bit of roughness and a little bit of transmission, you've got yourself a pretty decent looking water system right there. You should also set the index of refraction to 1.33 here to make it scientifically accurate. It doesn't really make a big difference here visually, but it can in different lighting scenarios, so I would suggest you just do it for the peace of your mind. Now, you don't just have to limit yourself to the Musgrave texture here. You can use the noise texture or even the wave texture if you want a specific directional wavy look. But to be honest, you don't even have to limit yourself to procedural Blender textures. There are normal maps available on the internet for different kinds of water waves. I found some free ones here on cadhatch.com. So you can even use them to displace your water. But for now, we're gonna stick with the Musgrave texture because it's a little more versatile and easy to understand. So yeah, as I said, just with this simple setup, you are gonna get a pretty good looking water system right here. But there is a very obvious problem going on here too. We can clearly see the under parts of the photo scan right here at the edge, which definitely does not look good. So let's take this material a little further. Let's delete the plane and add a cube instead of it and do the exact same thing that we just did. But this time we're gonna make use of the volume slot in the shader editor. We're gonna bring in a principal volume node and plug it into that slot. And once we do, we'll immediately see it makes the water look extremely dark, but at a lower density value, it gives the water a nice and murky look, almost like it has some sediments underneath it. You can even try giving it different colors if you want. A dark brownish color in this case will work fine for me. And you can stop right here if you want, but water does exhibit some volume absorption behavior too, so why not add that node as well? Add an add shader node and attach the volume absorption node in the bottom socket, and as soon as you do, you will immediately see the water gets even darker, as it should in an environment like this. But dial it down a little bit if you want, give it a bluish greenish color if you want, or art direct it in any way you want to. And a lot of people might tell you to use the volume scatter node here instead of the principal volume node, and they're right because both those nodes are basically the same, but the principal volume node has these emission sliders that I tend to use a lot whenever I really want to force a color on the water. So set the emission strength to something really low and give it whatever color you want, rather than changing the color of the volume absorption or the density right here, or even the main color on the principal BSDF node, because I feel like it tends to work a little better if compared with the others. But irrespective of what you choose to do here, you should have a pretty good looking water body at this point. But let's take it even further and make it even more realistic. If you've ever looked at drone footage flying over a huge water body, you would have noticed water usually isn't bumpy consistently or reflecting sunlight consistently. It has certain regions where there's clearly more bump than usual, and certain regions where the roughness isn't as much as some other regions. And we can very easily replicate that within Blender too. All you gotta do is add a noise texture with a color ramp and plug that into the roughness to quickly get that effect. Obviously, do dial the back up a little bit to the right and reduce the white color to something like dark gray to keep it subtle and realistic. And this was just to control the roughness though. We have to do the same thing for the bump as well. And we can very conveniently use the same setup we've got here. We just gotta make a new color ramp and drive that into the strength of the bump instead. And that's it. We've got both the effects working perfectly fine now. But again, mess with the black and white values here too to keep it subtle and realistic. Another extra layer of detail you can add here is by mixing a diffuse shader with the main principal shader and driving the factor through another noise texture but making it extremely big in size, and then driving it almost invisible with a color ramp until only these small specks are left, which almost looks like those bubbly foam specks you usually see near the shore of a pond or a dock or wherever the water is moving a lot. But that's not the only kind of foam you see in water. Foam can literally occur at any point of contact it has with literally anything, including with itself. So to replicate that effect, we can make use of the ambient occlusion node, which is really good at producing a black and white mask anywhere there's a contact between two objects. So let's make another principal BSDF node and mix it with the main one and drive the factor using the ambient occlusion node. To create that foamy texture, you gotta use two noise textures and mix them together using the linear light blend mode. How do I know the linear light blend mode looks the best here? Because I scroll through all the other blend modes, as we all do sometimes, and linear light came out to be the best. That's it. The trick though is to keep the scale of one of those noise textures really high, like almost around 1000, and the other one really low, maybe somewhere around 100 or 200. And now plugging this mixture into the emission node, you will immediately see the foam pop up. You can plug it into the base color too if you want, but plugging it into the emission slot makes it a little more prominent. And while you're at it, we can drive the same color ramp into the alpha channel as well for a little more control on the transparency of the foam. But this is how you create the foam effect procedurally within Blender. But if you want to keep it simple and not go through all this hard work, just download this foam texture from ambientcg.com to save some time and effort and get an equal if not better foam. Now this was just for when two objects come in contact, like here in the turtle render you can see this foam texture in effect at the shore a little bit. But you can also create foam at the choppy bits of the water by using the geometry node here in the shader editor and driving the factor using the pointiness or the normal plug instead of the ambient occlusion node. And that is enough to create foam in the choppy bits of the water. And that's it. You combine all these textures together and on top of that add some surface details yourself. Spread some leaves and twigs and grass and moss and lily pads manually on the water to really take the water to the next level. But this was just for still renders. To animate the water, you just gotta make the main Musgrave texture 4D and then just drive the W field with a driver, write #frame in it to turn it into a driver and start wobbling the water with every moving frame. But it will obviously be a little too fast, so we can divide that rate up by about 5000 or something like that to really soothe it down. But just doing that makes the water look a bit too procedural. So to take the animation up a notch, just add a mapping node to the texture and animate the X or Y location there using the same #frame method to give the water a bit of directionality and hide that proceduralness a little bit. And I guess that's it. That's how you really quickly animate water. Here's a quick tip while we're at it. Make sure you make everything a little wetter in the scene by driving the roughness up using the color ramp, especially for the things near the shoreline to sell the effect of the water even more. But water won't be just murky and muddy like this in all your scenes. You can also have instances where you need the water to be more clear, like maybe in a pool scene. So achieving that is also really easy. Firstly, it can be done by just removing all the volume nodes we just set up, because we need the water to be as clear as possible here. And then we can add some caustics over it to really give it that pool aesthetic, which is done by using the Voronoi texture. And there are a lot of ways you can make caustics with the Voronoi texture. For a sharper look, people usually like to use the distance to edge mode in the Voronoi texture. But what I have found is subtracting an F1 node with a smooth F1 node gives a much more realistic look. And you don't have to do this next step, but if you want to add an extra layer of caustics, you just duplicate this same setup again and make sure the above set is bigger in size and the bottom one is smaller in size, and then you mix them both together and plug it into the emission slot to get some nice caustics. Definitely dial the emission down a bit because we don't want it to be too overpowering. And to really sell the effect of the caustics, you can use a caustic gobo light to light the surroundings as well. I got this gobo setup from a Polyfure tutorial, which I will link in the description below. So go grab that light and spread it around in your pool scene to really take it to the next level. By the way, this is a pretty obvious fact that I'm stating right now, but I would still like to state it. The color you give to the water surface isn't going to matter much. Water, as in real life, takes the color of its surroundings. See, if I change the HDRI, the color of the water clearly appears to be different too. So keep that in the back of your head, even though it's such an obvious thing. But anyway, just in case you want to experiment with different kinds of colors, I found this great color palette resource for various kinds of watercolors you find in nature and different ecosystems, so you can even make use of that. And finally, after I have overloaded you with this much information and you've come to the conclusion that this is just too much work for you, I would recommend you try this Real Water add-on for some really good looking water materials. It's pretty inexpensive and will do almost all the work I just taught you for you automatically. but it is at a paid price, so it's up to you if you want to opt for it or not. I also think a free alternative for it would be the Blender Kit add-on. You just search for water materials there and you will seriously find some awesome results. There's frozen water and river water and pool water and all kinds of procedural stuff. So go check them out as well. Before we move on to the next section though, I would like to tell you more about today's sponsor, Squarespace. Now, if you've been thinking about making your own website, be it for e-commerce or for a non-profit or like for us 3D artists for a CV or for a portfolio, there's really no question if you should go with Squarespace or not, because they literally provide you with the best-in-class and extremely customizable website templates. I kept scrolling through their catalog and they literally kept recommending more and more options for me to choose from. And once I did choose one, I was shocked by how easy it was to use and how customizable it all was. And I don't know about you, but if I see a portfolio up on a custom website like this, as compared to some dude with just a social media handle, I am for sure gonna go with someone who has put the time and effort to make a good looking website like this. So head on to squarespace.com and try it all out for free for yourself. And once you are ready to launch your website, go to squarespace.com/stash. You got that? Squarespace.com/stash. to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. So go give it a try and spread your online presence like never before with Squarespace. Alright, let's move on. Let's now look at a much simpler and much quicker method to make a water system within Blender, which is by using the ocean modifier. It literally takes a few seconds to set it all up. You just add a plane and apply an ocean modifier on it. And that's it. Here you've got sliders for the overall size of the plane, there's sliders for the resolution, there's sliders for the wave size and choppiness, and so much more. And it's pretty straightforward, unlike most things in Blender. Those fields really do exactly what they say. But what really interests me in the ocean modifier though is the foam option and the spray option. You can enable the foam layer and the spray layer and give them an attribute name here. To apply the foam, you just gotta bring an attribute node in the shader editor and plug it with a color ramp that can go directly into the emission slot to get the foam right there in just a few clicks. And you can obviously use the color ramp to dial the foam in as well. The spray though will require a geometry node setup, which I learned from a Stack Exchange post. So I will just link it in the description below for you to check out, so you can see the node setup directly there. The results aren't super impressive by default, but if you are well versed with geometry nodes, you can really take this spray effect anywhere you want. But yeah, that's what the ocean modifier is good for. It is good for really quick results that actually look good. And it has really beginner friendly controls too. So yeah, if the shader editor scares you, the ocean modifier should be your first choice. Just make sure you up the resolution for the final render, and also don't forget to check out some of the presets here under the spectrum panel. But now let's talk about animating some waves in your water, which I think you already guessed it, is done very easily using the dynamic paint effect. All you gotta do here is go to the physics properties tab, click on dynamic paint and mark it as the canvas, and here under the surface type just choose waves, and then go select the object you want the water to respond to and do the same thing but choose brush instead of canvas. And now when you play the animation and dip the object in the water, it should create some waves for you. Just make sure your water plane has enough subdivisions though. More subdivisions it has, more defined the waves will be. The most important fields though when messing with dynamic paint are in the canvas properties. You should reduce the speed field to something like 0.15 to slow down the waves a little bit and have it at a realistic pace. And under the brush properties, change this factor value under the waves panel to something like 0.5 to reduce the impact the object creates when it comes in contact with the water. And I guess that's it. Dynamic paint is a very quick way to add some super easy wave simulations into your scene. I mean, look at this animation. In the background, there are literally splashes that just got created automatically just because I marked the right objects as the brush and had enough resolution on the water surface. So definitely give it a try if you haven't already. But let's now go a little deeper into the subject and understand how to create some underwater scenes, which also surprisingly are very easy to make. It's literally just a principal volume node and a volume absorption node added together, just like we did a few moments ago for the water surface. Just know that you can apply this material either on a cube which is surrounding your subject or directly do it in the world tab here in the shader editor. And you can combine it with that caustic light we used in the pool scene to get some really nice light rays here as well. And to really sell the effect, we can add a particle simulation to the subject of the scene, make it emit these simple transparent bubbles that have a very low lifetime and aren't affected by gravity a lot. Just that goes a long way to show that the subject is floating underwater. It's not perfect, but I think it looks good enough. And now let's take that little detour and see how we can create some rain in Blender. And I did a lot of experiments, and what I found is that we could make a simple particle system and emit some droplets from it to mimic rain. We could make a plane and add some dynamic paint on it to get some ripples too. But nothing I did matched the kind of results I got from this add-on called Bagger Range Generator. It's a geometry node based add-on made by the creator of the Bagger add-on, which I'm sure you've heard of. So I would highly suggest you give that a try. It is a paid add-on but still quite affordable. You get automatic splashes and just a material to put on the floor to make it generate procedural ripples too, and a lot more control through this panel right here. Options for the droplets, the splashes, the winds, in short just a lot of control compared to a simple particle system. So definitely give it a try for your rain driven scenes. And don't forget to pair it up with one of those rain droplet generators. There's a ton of them available online. I'll link the one I used in this scene in the description below. Combine that with the Bagger Range Generator to get even more realistic results. So try them both out together. But for now, let's get back on track and talk about those fake water simulations I showed you earlier. Starting with this tap of running water, one of the quickest cheats for replicating a stream of running tap water like this is to just use a displace modifier with a cloud texture attached to it on a cylinder mesh, change the coordinates to object, make that object an empty, and then just move that empty infinitely downwards to create some motion in the displace modifier, and you should get a pretty believable stream of running water. On top of that, we can even add a Musgrave texture to the displacement in the shader editor and animate that too for even more fluid-like random motion. And on top of that, we can also rotate the cylinder every few frames to get even more motion. And finally, a particle system spitting out small droplets at a very high speed to top it all off. You can even replace the cylinder with a particle system of metaballs, because metaballs tend to stick together on contact, which is a lot like how water droplets behave. So you can even take that route if you want. And I forgot to mention it before, but the rain and this fake tap water can really benefit from a lot of motion blur to give it that illusion of really fast moving water droplets. So don't forget to enable that too. And this was just one cheat. You can also simply use a video texture for some water streams, cut out the water part from a video clip using the knife tool, and then use a color ramp to drive the alpha so only the water stream is visible. And again, a particle system of droplets is always helpful to sell the effect a little more, and a little bit of dynamic paint driven by a secretly hidden cube to sell the realism even more. But it doesn't stop there either. You can also download a top-down shot of a beach and bring that into Blender and run that video texture into the displacement of a well-subdivided plane, and you can get some really believable beach waves and require no crazy fluid simulations at all. It is kinda crazy how much we can get away with just these simple techniques. But as I said, if you are one of those psychos who still would like to delve into fluid simulations, you can, but my experience with it was just horrible. And not because it's difficult to use. The fluid simulation within Blender, when you initially set it up, has pretty good default settings. You literally don't need to touch anything here, except maybe the resolution. The higher you take that, the more realistic results you get. You can also change the simulation method here. Epic is for more stable simulations and Flip is for more splashy simulations. And also you can generate spray and foam from these two checkboxes, which just creates two particle systems, each for spray and foam separately. And that's literally it. As I said, there's not much you need to change here, to be honest. But the problem with this system is that it's just too finicky. It works for a minute and then you make the tiniest change and it absolutely loses its mind. There's no consistency in performance or even the output of the Fluidsim. And again, it's not difficult, it's just buggy and hard to dial in because of that. Maybe the experience would have been different if I had a better computer, but for now I would not recommend the Fluidsim to anybody. I haven't tried the Flip Fluids add-on though. I have heard good things about it, but it's kind of expensive for me right now, so I would love for you to share your experience if you've tried it and how it compares to the default Manta Flow fluid system in the comment section below, and maybe then I will give it a try. So please do drop a comment down below if you can. I would really appreciate it. But yeah, that was my experience with the built-in Fluidsim options Blender has to provide. What really excites me though is the advent of simulation nodes now in Blender 3.6 and what that entails for fluid simulations in the future, because a few Blender community members have already tried their hand at it and gotten some really impressive results already. So I can't wait for this to advance and solve a lot of problems that Blender has had for a few years now with its simulation tools. And understandably, the team behind Blender cannot make everything perfect just by themselves. That's why a community-driven tool like Simulation Nodes can help other capable members in the community to solve those problems for them, I think. So I will link some of the best water simulation projects in the description below if you want to check them out for yourself. I wish I was smart enough to present something I made myself. But well, let's not even go there because that would be a waste of both your time and mine. So just check out the links in the description if you want to delve deeper into that subject. But I guess that's it from my end. That's all I had planned for this video. I would love for you to drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Half these tips I showed you, I learned from the comment section of other YouTube videos. So drop a comment and teach me and everyone else hanging out there a little more if you can. That would be really helpful. By the way, I know this video was not too beginner friendly, so if you are a beginner and couldn't catch a particular thing or a topic, just drop a comment and I'll make sure I comment back and help you out in any way I can, or at least guide you to the right tutorial for it. Join the Patreon if you'd like. I just made this looping animation a few weeks back, so if you want to see the breakdown for that, the Patreon is the place to be. And there's a lot more content arriving in the coming weeks, so subscribe to the Patreon if you would like to support the channel directly. Thanks to the current members, of course. This channel would be nothing without their support, so a huge thank you to all the Patreon folks. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching till the end. If you did, I will hopefully see you guys in the next video. Bye.